if the political class don't get a grip of the problem quickly. The steps required are going to get ever more drastic. It's already the 11th hour and 59th minute. There isn't a war going on, but the threats we face are no less than the ones we faced in 1939. We've got to stop this stupidity. We've got to start deregulating, cutting taxes, promoting our small and medium-sized businesses. None of this is being done by the Labour Party. And sadly, none of that was done by the Conservative Party either. How are you going to expect a criminal justice system to work if at the heart of the Pakistani rape gangs is the protective blanket our institutions have put round? We need a revolution to save the country.
I honestly don't see how it reverses. I don't see a Trump of Europe.
There's no hope of a Trumpian kind of path. But what I'm really hoping for is that the centre of gravity of acceptable political discourse continues to move in favour of a sovereign, proud, prosperous United Kingdom. And I think Advance UK is going to surprise people with how well it does.
When did you partner up with Tommy? And what is your relationship with Tommy?
Like many others, I saw Tommy as the Voldemort of politics as well, the bad boy of everything. And Tommy Robinson's incarceration was a manifestation of how this country's gone wrong. It was clear that he was put in prison for political reasons, and therefore it was worth calling it out. We sort of came to know more of each other through that way, and I'm delighted that he's joined the party, and I'm delighted that he supports the party.
I've spoken to a lot of people over the years, Ben, but I really enjoyed my time with you. You clearly are a man on a mission with real, sincere purpose.
What matters to me is that the next government is pro-British and stands by principle, not expediency, and will deliver this country from the perils in which it finds itself. And I'll stand bloodied until either I prevail, we prevail, or I fall on the battlefield.
Hi, it's Brian Rose from London Real. You probably know that we've just recently been re-platformed on YouTube after 25 months completely in the dark. The truth is, I really need your help. What I really need you to do is click on that subscribe button right now, like this video, and maybe even leave a comment or share the link with friends. We're really fighting against an algorithm that's tried to keep us quiet for so long. And the more subscribers we have, the more people watch our content, the better guests we can bring you, the better content, and we can continue transforming lives. We've been doing this for 14 years now. I want to do this for another 14 years, but I really need your help. So click on that subscribe button, like the video, leave a comment, share this, and we're going to continue to bring you more and more great content. Thank you. This is London Real. I am Brian Rose. My guest today is Ben Habib, the politician, businessman, and leader of the new political party, Advance UK. You were elected as a member of the European Parliament in 2019, where you became a vocal supporter of Brexit and a fierce critic of the EU's grip on British sovereignty. Today, with Advance UK, you're challenging the two-party system and calling for real change on issues from immigration and free speech to economic reform. As a successful property investor and entrepreneur, you bring a business perspective to politics, warning that Britain will dangerously decline unless it confronts uncontrolled immigration, government failure, and the silencing of dissent. 2 weeks ago, you were the only politician who took part in the March on London political rally alongside Tommy Robinson, a massive event that sparked controversy and debate about free speech, protest rights, and the future of British democracy. Ben, welcome to London Real.
Well, thank you very much for having me on, Brian. It's a pleasure to be here. And I was just saying earlier, what a wonderful studio you've got, and this backdrop of these terrific 19th century looking Union flags. Union Jacks, actually, they look like. They look like they've come off the back of a ship, don't they?
Yeah, we've had these for 10 years now, flying them proudly here.
Yeah, they're great.
I never saw anything wrong with that. In fact, a lot of people know these flags because they've seen this show. The show's been watched over 1 billion times. So I've had people come in.
1 billion times?
1 billion times,
wow.
Yeah. So I've had people that come in and they're like, I know this show because the flags, the backdrop, and it's called London Real. Because when I started this show, I knew that I believe London is one of the greatest brand names in the world and one of the greatest cities in the world. And even though I was born in America, this city is just given me everything. I've always had tremendous success here, and it's really a city I love. and really care about, as I guess as do you.
Yeah, and me. I mean, I came to England in 1979, went to boarding school, then went to university. And I came to London in 1987 as a graduate recruit at what was then called Shearson Lehman Brothers, but you'll know it as Lehman Brothers.
Yes.
And I remember being quite in awe of London, almost overwhelmed by London when I first came at the age of 22. And then I had a 3-month stint in New York. And coming back to London was like coming to a village. and I've absolutely adored London ever since.
That's fascinating, because I had the same experience. I was in New York after college. I went to MIT, got an engineering degree, went to Wall Street for 4 years. And when I came to London, I was like,
phew, you can breathe.
This is a suburb. Yeah. And so I've been, indoctrinated to the extreme. And so I could operate here, freely. And you've got the Hampstead Heath, you can jump in the pond, and it's
I know. When I came back I lived in Manhattan for those 3 months, and you can't even see the sky really because of all the tall buildings. And then if you want to go for a run on the pavement, you're dodging people all the time.
Yeah.
And I came to London and thought, wow, we're so lucky to have London.
And yet I have tourists that come here and they say, this place is so intense, I can barely handle it. And I'm like, really? So yeah, I know what you mean. And so many people come to London and they just compliment, maybe how it used to be, but friendly people. And, it's still, one of the great metropolises, but we can talk about where London is along that way. I had this burning question that I'm trying to get my head around when I saw you on stage on that protest with Tommy. And I had Tommy in here a few weeks ago.
I saw, yeah.
And I had an amazing conversation with Tommy. And it's the first time I spoke to Tommy, even though he's been on my radar for a long time. And one of the crazy things is, Ben, is that I'm in the media business, and yet I still have media biases towards people, which is crazy, because if anyone should know that the media never portrays someone correctly, it would be someone in this business. And yet still people walk into the studio and I have all these preconceived notions about them because of the headlines that I've read.
Yeah.
And yet almost always when I sit there and talk to them for a couple hours, and what's that old proverb, walk a mile in a man's shoes, I realize why they're the person that they are. And that really helps a lot to understand why they feel that way and the journey they've been on. And that's what I got from Tommy. And so I wanted to have you here, but when I saw you on that stage, I said, here is Ben Habib, right? And as you said, you were born in Pakistan. You didn't move to Britain until you were 14. Your father's Muslim. And you're on stage with Tommy Robinson, a British nationalist who in some way, shape or form believes the plight of England is due to Muslim rape gangs, right? And I'm sitting there thinking, these are two opposites, and yet you're getting on like a house on fire and the crowd is cheering for you. Yeah. So Ben, please explain to me this conundrum.
So my dad is Pakistani and he is Muslim. My mother is English, blue-eyed blonde from Isleworth, and her father fought in World War I, and my great-grandfather was a vicar. So I have two different sides from which I was born. And I was born in Karachi in 1965, which was post-imperial India, if you like, Pakistani side of India, but post-imperial India, with the tailwinds of British Empire still, going through the streets of Karachi. And so we grew up with a very anglicized, in a very anglicized way. And the school I went to in Karachi, which was the Karachi Grammar School, was a school set up by the British when they were there. It taught an English syllabus. It was the time in history when we actually had pride in the United Kingdom across the Commonwealth. The Commonwealth was relatively new back in 1965 through to 79. And the British, the sense of our former British rulers was a positive one. Everyone was proud of the fact that we were part of the Commonwealth and that Pakistan had an imperial British past. And just like in the United Kingdom, our history is being rewritten. It has been rewritten in Pakistan too. So I find that Pakistanis whom I grew up with and were very pro the West when I was a child are less pro the West now. But there's been a form of indoctrination taking place, particularly in the Muslim world, and we can talk about Islam if you'd like to, but particularly in the Muslim world. And the other thing, about the sort of period in which I was born was that Islam was going through a kind of enlightened period. I'm sure you're familiar, Brian, with photographs of Iran, Tehran, Baghdad, Beirut, Karachi, Islamabad. From that era, 1950s and 60s, all the women have their hair open. They're all wearing skirts and
Very
dresses.
cosmopolitan.
Cosmopolitan. And Islam has regressed. We've jumped straight into Islam, but Islam has regressed since then. And when I left Karachi in 1979, it was still relatively enlightened form of Muslim practice. But during the 80s, Wahhabism, this more fundamentalist form of Islam, which, by the way, I think Islam has a tendency to head back towards. Every time it gets enlightened, it gets yanked back to fundamentalism. This Wahhabi fundamentalist form of Islam was exported out of Saudi Arabia with petrodollars and so on. And we seem to have taken some of the worst forms of that into the United Kingdom. And Tommy Robinson, to give him his due, many of us are Johnny-come-latelys to waking up to what's been going on. And as a working class lad, this is how I understand it, as a working class lad in Luton. And I remember going through Luton in the 1980s and thinking this looks like downtown Karachi.
Really?
Back in the 80s, because I used to go through Luton. I was at Cambridge University. My parents had a house in Berkhamsted, so I used to take the A505 through Luton. And I used to think this place looks like downtown Karachi in certain places. So I can see what Tommy Robinson grew up with. And if you're experiencing a foreign culture, a culture that is proselytizing, which is muscular, which doesn't hold itself to itself, and is very fundamental and unforgiving in its ideology, you're going to feel that coming into your community. And so someone like Tommy Robinson, I'm sure he's not alone in having experienced it, would have seen it much earlier than I did. I was in the ivory towers of Cambridge, then Lehman Brothers in the city, living in comfortable suburbs, and not even suburbs, central London. And so, as I was saying to you, Brian, before I came on, I've been on a journey, and I think Tommy Robinson has been on a journey ahead of many of us. And he's been made the Voldemort of British politics. For some reason, as you rightly point out, the media can grab someone and they can mold him into this person they wish him to be. Look, he's no saint, as far as I can see. He comes from Luton, he's working class, he's got tattoos, but he's a straight-talking, straight shooter, from what my experience of him is. And they've turned him into the Voldemort of politics. He is the bad boy of everything. And, I think if he's been on a journey, it's not for me to opine on his journey, but I think the journey he's been on is himself trying to understand how the hell did this country go from what I was born into to where it is now? How the hell did it get here? We all ask ourselves that question. And getting to the answer of that question, by the way, I think is a critically important step, because if you can't answer the question, it manifests itself in anger, and you want to hit out at whatever it is that's caused this. Yeah. But if you can get to the root causes of the problem, and this is where politicians need to really exercise their focus, get to the root causes of these problems, be brave in revealing what the root causes of these problems are. How did the United Kingdom become as it is now, precisely, and therefore what are the solutions? And that is our job. There were what? Well over 500,000 people who came to that march. Some say 1 million. I know many people tried to come to the rally and couldn't make it and had to go back on train. There were 2.5 million people watching. Now let's say there were 3-4 million people interested in what was happening on the 13th of September. If the politicians' only response to that is, these are a bunch of lunatics who are far right, troublemakers, nationalists, and so on, if that's their reaction, then those people will feel vilified. They'll feel that the political class who should represent them have turned their backs on them. There'll be no route for those people to give effect to the changes they wish to see in the country, democratically and peaceably. And therefore it falls to politicians, and I think it's critical and important, and that's why I spoke at the rally. It falls to politicians to engage, find out what the issues are that's troubling these people, get to the root causes of these problems, reveal those problems, and through revealing them, find the solutions, propose the solutions, and put a proverbial arm of friendship round the people and say, we get it. We are going to sort this out for you. But even after that march, Starmer came out and said, well, this is a bunch of far-right people who've gathered in London and they're hijacking the flag and we've got to reclaim the flag. He doesn't get it. And one thing I wanted to say in my speech on that day, which I didn't say, was that now Parliament, well, in the 1980s, when I first came to London, Parliament had no protection around it. You could literally see all the parliamentary buildings from the road. And then we had the IRA bombs and they put barricades up, and then we started bombing Iraq and doing all sorts of stuff abroad. And so we needed more protections around Parliament. And I was horrified to go there the other day. I don't know if you've been there recently, but now they've got a 9-foot tall metal fence all the way down the front of Parliament. Really? That is the best optical revelation of how Parliament has now turned its back on the people. Parliament doesn't represent its people. It's sitting separately from its people. And because it sits separately from its people, it feels the need of this massive metal fence. It is literally put a fence in the way of its own obligations. And we must, as politicians, now understand what the hell is going on in this country. And we've got to, and I think this country is facing an existential threat. I think if we don't get a grip of the problems and start resolving them quickly, I think the United Kingdom, Western Europe, Western civilization, I think will cease to exist in the way that you and I remember it through most of our lives.
Yeah, I honestly don't see how it reverses at this point unless there is some drastic action. I don't see a Trump of Europe. I don't see anyone that can turn it around. And let's remind ourselves that Trump almost didn't make it, and he maybe could have not been elected. And that's a point of potential reversal of that trend, but I don't see it in Western Europe.
So, I mean, I disagree with you, actually, if you don't mind me saying so, Brian. I mean, I think 5 years ago, ideologically, this country was in a much worse place than it is now. You know, the million people or whatever it was, 2.5 million people online, wouldn't have felt able to come out 5 years ago and show their support.
True.
The so-called Overton window, the center of gravity of acceptable political discourse, has undoubtedly shifted in favor of the nation state of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, borders, policies being made for the nation state, etc., rather than this extreme form of what I call liberal global ideology that seems to have infected our political class. The reason they turn their back on the British people is because actually they do hold the British people in contempt. They think their job should be done on the world stage, governing for the globe. That's why we have so many policies that are so detrimental to the United Kingdom. And because they're governing for the globe, they don't actually recognize our own borders. Starmer can't even bring himself to call those who've entered this country illegal migrants. He calls them irregular migrants because he's completely hijacked by this global order. He's pro-EU. He even said, I think, when he was being interviewed by Emily Maitlis, when she asked him, would you rather be in Davos or Westminster? He said, I'd rather be in Davos. This was a guy who was standing to be Prime Minister of this country. He'd rather be in a foreign place with a whole load of foreign leaders than with his people in the United Kingdom. But I think that's changing, and it's evidenced by the march. It's evidenced by the way Reform UK is doing so well in the polls, and the way Advance UK will do very, very, very well in the polls in the future once we're registered as a political party. So I think we can save the UK. I think the British people want the UK to be saved. They know in their hearts what's required to save it. But you make a very powerful point, Brian, and you said that the steps required are going to be drastic.
How do you get out of a rat race? How do you create wealth not only for yourself, but also for the generations to come after?
I am absolutely amazed with the quality of companies that we're getting exposure to.
We go on to Zoom calls with the innovators and the folks who are building new applications in metaverse, blockchain, artificial intelligence, decentralized finance.
What's going on, everybody? Thumbs up if you can see me.
We are focusing on early stage investment.
And the quality of people that we're getting exposure to, whether it be Dan Tapiero with 1RT, Jason Ma from Open, Yatsu from Animoca.
It's been a phenomenal experience thus far. It has far exceeded my expectations.
We are focusing on cutting-edge technologies.
I view it now as the best investment I've ever made. The upside, I view, is unlimited.
And as a retail investor, I would never get this exposure anywhere else outside of Investment Club.
See you in the investment club.
And the steps required are going to get ever more drastic if the political class don't get a grip of the problem quickly. It's already the 11th hour and 59th minute. It is already very late in the day, but they have to grab it. And if they leave it longer, then the steps become more drastic, more draconian. And what we don't want, well, what we want to avoid at all possible cost, is a solution that isn't peaceful. We must take the support of the people, give it a voice, and have a peaceable outcome to this for everyone involved.
And that's why you got into politics.
Well, that's not why I got into politics. I've been on a journey, as I mentioned, and I got into politics simply because I thought the political class were lying about leaving the EU. They lied when they said that simply voting to leave the EU would mean we'd have a massive recession, 1 million jobs would be lost, 75,000 jobs would be lost in the city. Mark Carney, who is the hapless governor of the Bank of England, said that there'd be a run on the banks. I don't know if you remember that.
I don't remember
He said in 2016 there would be a run on the banks if we voted to leave the EU, and therefore he was putting aside £250 billion to save the British banking system. Now, there's nothing more likely to get the British banking system into trouble than the governor of the Bank of England saying it might get into trouble, and therefore I'm putting money aside. He was actually perpetrating Project Fear. And I thought something is wrong with our political class. He shouldn't even be opining in politics.
Correct.
He's the blooming governor of the Bank of England. And that was the beginning of my journey that I've been on. So my first battle was with the EU. And as I engaged with the EU, I realized actually the EU is one manifestation of a global order that is seeking to take control of countries, denude them of their domestic democracies. And when you denude a country of its democracy, you denude it of its national identity. If you're not making laws in your own country for your own people, you're no longer a nation state. If you take down borders, as they have done in Europe with the Schengen zone, you're no longer a nation state. And then I saw this manifestation actually being applied much more broadly across the globe. Lockdowns were a wake-up call for me. You know, a totalitarian response initiated in China was adopted wholesale across the West. In the late 60s, we had a virulent form of flu and there was no lockdown. People just had to ride the wave. We all know that viruses evolve to settle down and become endemic as opposed to in a form of extreme epidemic. We had an epidemic which would have become benign and endemic, and we had to get through that. But we had this top-down control of the British people. And then we had vaccinations, and vaccinations are great if they work, but they should never be mandatory. And it was shoved down our throat. Normally it takes 17 years for a drug to go from origination to market. They got this thing out in a year and they were forcing it down our throats. And so I've realized that the threats facing the United Kingdom, facing Western Europe and Western civilization more generally, obviously from the EU and organizations like the EU, but they're manifold. And they all come from this kind of liberal global order, mass migration being one example of the way they've allowed nation states to be set aside, borders being taken down. And we need to fight against all of this. We need to reinstitute the nation state. We need to reinstitute freedom of speech, because in the pursuit of propagating their extreme ideologies, the way we've been governed with net zero, open borders, our culture being set aside, the only way you can shut the people up is by shutting down speech.
Yeah.
And so we've got to fight against the shutting down of freedom of our speech, which is the cornerstone of democracy. We've got to throw off the shackles of international law so that we can actually do what we need to for our people in this country. And fundamentally, we've got to find again equality before the law. Because having practiced all these extreme policies with mass migration and putting a protective blanket around foreign cultures and setting our own culture aside, we've effectively also undermined our criminal justice system. You know, we will throw the book at white working class people, but we will protect ethnic minorities. And even the Sentencing Council, for example, that guides courts on the kinds of sentences that they should set for particular crimes, was advising our judicial system to treat ethnic minorities more leniently than they treat white people. Why? Since when did Lady Justice have her blindfold removed? The whole point about law and its application is that it should be blind. That if you do the crime, you do the time. And so all of these things have conspired to undermine our place in Western civilization, undermine Western civilization itself. And I'm still learning more and more of what has been done, and therefore what must be reversed in order to get us back to a safe place.
All right, so you started in 19 as a member of the European Parliament to keep pushing Brexit through, from what I understand.
Yeah, which is quite a binary thing.
Right, yeah.
You know, but it's a much bigger battle than just Brexit.
Right, okay, and then you joined Reform last year.
I joined Reform in March 2023.
2023, okay.
And Reform was the new manifestation of what I had been a part of, the Brexit Party.
Right, okay.
But I was reluctant to join Reform for various reasons, which I can bore you with, but I was reluctant to join. Well, I'll bore you with it.
Yeah, and let's talk about Reform.
Yeah,
what has it done and what hasn't it done? Because otherwise there would be no Advance UK unless Reform had done what you thought it should do.
Yeah, exactly right. And so another sort of journey I've been on is that many of the people on our own side of the fence, our side of the debate, who I thought were solid, actually are not solid. And I can't talk about this frankly unless I talk about it frankly. And I had thought Farage had a political philosophy similar to mine, which was nation state first, borders, sovereignty, freedom, etc. What I have discovered over time is that Farage, who is Reform is Farage, he's such a big persona, he is Reform, and constitutionally it's virtually impossible to remove him from Reform. Farage doesn't have a political philosophy. Farage is part of the political class that pursues expediency over principle. And he will pivot this way or that way to curry favour with whomever he thinks he needs to curry favour with. So, for example, even though it was clear to anyone who was prepared to think about it from first principles and to think about it objectively, Tommy Robinson undoubtedly, in my mind, was put in prison last year for political reasons. It was a politicised Attorney General who threw the book at him. But Farage couldn't bring himself to call that out. He's got an antipathy to Tommy Robinson, which I think is born out of his belief that Tommy Robinson is kryptonite in politics, and therefore he cannot in any way associate himself with Tommy Robinson, and he will throw Tommy Robinson under a bus. But if you're looking for someone to save the United Kingdom from the forces of cancel culture, to promote freedom of speech, then you've got to be brave and look, Tommy Robinson, as I've said before, is no saint, but it was clear that he was put in prison for political reasons. And it was incumbent on Farage to call that out. Farage was also a coward, in my view, when it came to the post-Southport protests. You know, he first was brave and he said that, I think he said something about how the protests were justified. The facts had been hidden and therefore people were protesting. And I completely agree with that. Then they called it the Farage right and he went completely quiet on it. He had a parliamentary position. He could have spoken up in Parliament where he has privilege, where he's protected. He could say what he wanted in Parliament. He didn't say it. Only recently has Reform come out and started banging the drum for Lucy Connolly, you know, who was wrongly incarcerated. They only did it when it became acceptable to do it. They still don't talk about Peter Lynch, for example, who went to prison for the same reasons as Lucy Connolly, but hanged himself. And Farage has moved, for example, from a position last year where he thought talking about mass deportations of illegal migrants would not be acceptable in the political spheres in which he mixes. So he denounced mass deportation. He said it's impossible. When he was asked whether he had an ambition for mass deportations of illegal migrants, he said, no, I don't even have an ambition. And now the other day he came out with a policy talking about mass deportation. It's because the Overton window shifted, the centre of gravity shifted, so he's following it. But the centre of gravity is shifting because of people like myself and others, and Tommy Robinson, no doubt. And so Farage isn't the Churchillian figure. He's not the brave figure that we need to save this country. He will follow where he thinks it's safe to go. But we need a leader, someone who will take the bold steps and call things out as they are and do it in a responsible way. I'm not suggesting there should be anything other than a peaceable approach to this, but do it and provide the solutions at the same time.
Now, if I were to play devil's advocate, would I say Nigel is trying to make the right political move? Because if he supports Tommy, he might alienate Muslim voters or Muslim sympathizing voters and lose an entire chance to go head to head against conservatives. Is that a real political decision that he has to make?
I think that is a flattering.
Is that cowardly?
That's a flattering understanding, I think, of what he's up to.
Okay.
But let's just walk through that possibility.
Okay.
Let's say he wanted to challenge the Conservative Party, that he actually recognises, he should recognise, that under 14 years of Conservative government, this country's gone down the tubes. If he recognised that properly, he would not be recruiting former Tory MPs, and he's now got one current MP, but former Tory MPs, many of whom stand against the apparent political philosophy that reform should have. Like take Jake Berry, for example. Jake Berry voted to stay in the EU. Jake Berry was pro-lockdown. Jake Berry was pro-net zero. These are all things that reform say they're against, but they took Jake Berry into their bosom.
Because they want clout to show they're getting Tories.
But if you're infected with the problem, you're not going to be the solution to the infection.
Why is he doing it?
Because he is in the pursuit of power.
Right.
It's old-fashioned politics.
Okay.
And he hasn't taken on board, or if he has taken it on board, he doesn't care, that the country is being fundamentally threatened right now. We are, listen, there isn't a war going on, but the threats we face are no less than the ones we faced in 1939.
That's a bold statement.
No, it's true. Suella Braverman said it all in 2023 when she was Home Secretary. She made a fantastic speech in Washington. I don't know if you recall this, Brian, and I will always hold her in high regard for making the speech. She was Home Secretary.
Yeah.
And she said things which I've never heard a sitting member of the cabinet say, but she concluded by saying Western civilization is threatened. And we are threatened. We are threatened.
Yeah.
When it becomes offensive to the political class that you fly your flag, you've got a problem.
Yeah.
And that's where we are in politics. So
reform is a power grab, is what you're saying, even though
reform is a power grab.
Much of their platform is combating some of these things, but you're saying it's lip service, and
it's lip service.
Okay.
The persona of Farage makes you think that that's what he's doing. But if you look in and try and follow what he actually says and does, as political obsessors like I do, you know that he's not there. He's definitely not there. Even take his deportation policy, for example. Do you remember 2 weeks ago, he came out and he said, we will now deport all illegal migrants. They will be detained and they will be deported. Great, we all thought. The next morning he said, except women and children will be excluded. Now that basically has two immediate impacts. The first is that any single male illegal migrant in the UK is going to get shacked up and have children, for want of a better way of describing it. And even in a post-European Convention of Human Rights world, courts are going to be very reluctant to separate women and children from their father. So anyone wishing to avoid Farage's now mass deportation program just needs to get married and have children. The other effect of that will be that he will encourage less single men to come over and more women and children to cross the channel. It was an encouragement, an inducement, his policy, for women and children to come across the channel. But the other thing he did, which I found absolutely an affront, was he said that we would have to revoke the European Convention of Human Rights. Good, tick in the box for that. But we won't revoke it in Northern Ireland, because Northern Ireland is part of the Good Friday Agreement, and the Good Friday Agreement legislates provides for the European Convention of Human Rights staying in place. Instantly, what he did was basically say that any illegal migrant in the United Kingdom wishing to avoid deportation simply needs to go to Northern Ireland, because we won't be able to deport them from there. So in that one step, he also revealed, Brian, that he doesn't stand for the nation state of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, because he was prepared to throw Northern Ireland under the ECHR bus and export all Great Britain's illegal migrants to Northern Ireland. That is the effect of his policy. So he's either not thinking it through, or he doesn't get it. And I don't think he gets it. I don't think he cares about Northern Ireland. He's also on the record saying a united Ireland is inevitable. So Farage is this way and that way. And I'd like to stop talking about Farage if that's all right. But
was it a difficult decision to break away and create your own party? Because now you're taking something that had mass, that had momentum, the Reform Party, and it's, impressive what they built. And now you're going to splinter it, probably the wrong term in Europe, and go another way. Did you have reservations? That's a big decision to make.
So I knew a new political force was needed. And if you believe, as I do, that the country is threatened, its existence is threatened, then you have very little option but to do something, even if it's low probability of success. Okay.
That's why I ran for mayor.
And high risk.
I was angry at the way they were treating my city, and I wanted to change it, and I didn't really care about the consequences.
Yeah. I'd rather be on my deathbed knowing I tried than lying on my deathbed thinking I didn't try and look at the United Kingdom now. Okay. If I fail, I fail, but I've tried. And initially I thought when a new political force was needed, that it was too big a task. In fact, I can reveal it now because I've revealed it a couple of times. I had a conversation with Elon Musk in January. Okay. And Elon Musk said, you need a new political party because reform isn't it. And I said to him that you're right, but I don't think it's possible in British politics. To get reform on the table was massive. To get yet another political force on the table would be virtually impossible. And so I kind of said, no, I don't think it's going to work, Elon. But then Reform sacked Rupert Lowe, you might recall, in March, and that unfolded. And I thought that created the opening for a new political party. And I was actually in discussions with Rupert. Then I DM'd Elon Musk and said, I think you're right. I take back, I was in error. I was in error in January. You were right. I'm going to have a go at putting together a new political party, and I hope you'll be able to support it. And I hope Rupert will be part of it. I wanted Rupert initially to lead it, but for reasons of his own, he doesn't want to. And so here we are with Advance UK. And what I do think is that the political landscape is extremely febrile. The British electorate are searching for something that will save them. I think virtually everyone at that march and the 2.5 million people online know that reform's not the answer. They've already woken up to that, because if reform was the answer, Farage would have been at the UTK rally. He would have spoken to his own people. He didn't speak to his people. So they know that he's not the answer. And I think Advance UK is going to surprise people with how well it does.
When did you partner up with Tommy? Is that the right word? And what is your relationship with Tommy? Did he know you were creating this party? When he saw you created it, did he reach out and say, I want to support you?
So, like many others, I saw Tommy as the Voldemort of politics as well. So, as I say, I've been on a journey. In 2019, 3 weeks into my political career, when I was still quite taken by Nigel Farage, the Brexit Party line was Tommy Robinson is anti-Islam, he's an extremist, we can't associate with UKIP because Tommy Robinson and UKIP.
Peter Thiel took $500,000 and turned it into $1 billion using the exact same techniques we're using inside the investment club. He met his CEO, his name was Zuckerberg. He pitched him the deal and he said, okay, I'll give you $500,000. Mark went public and sold the shares to people like you. Well, what happened to Peter? Well, he exited and got a 2,300x return. The wealthy invest in early stage companies, folks. The public markets are for suckers. It's a rigged game. By the way, this happens in crypto as well. It's called pre-sale tokens. This is Solana. Does anybody know this chain? They sold pre-sale tokens for 4 cents And you can see the date on there, April 5th, 2018. Look at Solana today, folks. That thing's up over 1,000x. The media and Wall Street and all these hype people get you to buy the top. Meanwhile, they put their clients in at the bottom and they use you for liquidity to make their clients rich. You can play this same game. You just have to have the financial education and the deal flow. That's it.
Are very closely aligned. And people chuck it back at me now. I said in, I think, May 2019 that I couldn't be with UKIP because Tommy Robinson is there. And so I've been on this, my own journey. And I think the political, my calling out his incarceration as a politically motivated imprisonment, I think resonated no doubt with Tommy Robinson. I think he saw at that point that even though I don't need to be an apologist for Tommy Robinson or any other individual in politics. The people I need to be an apologist for are the British people. And Tommy Robinson's incarceration was a manifestation of how this country's gone wrong, and therefore it was worth calling it out because the British people would benefit from me calling that out. And Tommy Robinson could see, I think, at that point, that I was brave enough to identify the issue, or sensible enough to identify the issue, and then brave enough to call it out. And so I think, I came probably on his radar at that point. And then when I set up a new political party, I was in touch with a number of people who he knows, Tommy Robinson knows and I know, and perfectly good people, very brainy people, some superb people who now are on Advanced UK's college, in Advanced UK's college. And so, we sort of came to know more of each other through that way. And then Tommy Robinson, who, by the way, does not want to be a politician. He said that publicly and he said that to me privately.
But that could change.
What? That could change. That could change. Of course, that could change. But he said he joined the party. Then he advocated for the party. And he's one of 35,000 members. But obviously, I'm delighted that he's joined the party and I'm delighted that he supports the party, as am I that Elon Musk endorses the party. Now, there will be people who don't like either Tommy Robinson or Elon Musk, but what I say to them is it's not about Tommy Robinson or Elon Musk. It's about identifying, as I've said repeatedly in this interview now, it's about identifying the issues which are challenging the United Kingdom, calling them out bravely, and then finding solutions and making the case for those solutions so that the United Kingdom, so the people who are concerned about the United Kingdom have a voice, and so that we can actually settle the UK.
Right. You're very principled in that sense.
It's absolutely got to be the way.
Yeah. You've seen the bastardization of that in reform, and that was clearly not okay with you, and that's why you left.
It's not okay.
So you need to call everything the way the principles are. So if Tommy's being wronged in political persecution, no matter how you feel about him, you have to call that out.
You've got to call it out.
Right.
And maybe there was a time 30 or 40 years ago to be a career politician and go this way and that way, because fundamentally the UK was in a safe place. All you were doing in the political landscape was 1 or 2 degrees of marginal correction required here or there. And the UK could tolerate bad politicians. We're not there now. As I said, the threats facing the country are of a nature that may set us aside, set our existence aside. It may not come through war like it threatened us in 1939, but the threats are very, very significant. And we could end up like Venezuela in 5 seconds. Let me tell you, the economic policy, I'm sure you know this as a finance guy, the economic policies being pursued by Rachel Reeves could render the UK Venezuela.
Yeah.
We don't want to be there. We've got to stop this stupidity. We've got to start deregulating, getting rid of net zero, cutting taxes, liberating British working class, liberating the middle classes, putting aspiration back into society, promoting our small and medium-sized businesses. None of this is being done by the Labour Party. And sadly, none of it.
To continue watching the rest of the episode for free, visit our website londonreal.tv or click the link in the description below.
Most people will never see this opportunity. Dubai luxury transformation projects have historically delivered 40 to 90% annual returns. That is incredible. These were once reserved only for insiders with access. I spent 15 years on Wall Street, and I learned this: the biggest returns always go to the people who get the call first. Now, you finally can. We've just received a brand new project with major upside potential. Allocations move fast. Click the link, apply now, and speak to my team. This is your chance to see what others never will.